Well, now it's time for the panel. I'm sure the whole Parliament is eagerly tuned to right now. Patrick Gorman and Jason Falinski here in the studio with me. Gents, thanks both for your time.
Thank you, Tom.
Thanks for having us, and hello to every single viewer that is watching in Parliament House.
Let's start on what I'm sure will be some furious agreement, farm trespass and bipartisanship over this, because it's going to pass. We're on the same page here.
Looks like it. You guys are in agreement?
Look, we've raised some concerns about making sure that it doesn't have unintended consequences, but no one wants to see sort of militant farm activists destroying people's very legitimate businesses. I know in my electorate of Perth we've had...
Do you have many farms?
No, but we've had some pretty wild anti-meat activists storming restaurants, saying... Storming restaurants, yes.
While you were eating? Or?
Not while I was eating, no. But it's happened in recent times, and so I do have a lot of sympathy for farmers who've had to put up with this, and so hopefully this will give them some assurance and some protection. Is
there any... Because a few of the bills Labor's supported, but sort of put a marker there saying we don't like this aspect. I did hear Joel Fitzgibbon say there might be issues with media publishing articles, but I think there's a carve-out for that. Is there any caveat you're offering on this?
Well, look, the concerns that have been raised are more around whether it would have implications for other civil organisations, legitimate forms of protest, but no, we don't want to see farmers have to put up with this kind of junk, so we're happy to support the initiative and the intent of the bill.
There you go.
Yeah, well, that was easy, wasn't it? I mean, look, I think, I agree with Patrick, but it's a little bit more than that, because you've got people coming onto people's, homes where they feel isolated, and of course that's quite a sort of physically threatening thing to do. But that's part of it. But the other big part of it is having websites and carriage services that are inciting people to do this sort of stuff, lying about what's going on in that farm, bringing people to rage and committing,
It's interesting, the jail term coming in there. So if someone's telling the truth, and they're not a media organisation, they're telling the truth about a particular farm and practices there, and then someone reads that information and then decides to roll in. Yeah. Where are we there? Is that incitement, or is that just something...
No, that's not incitement.
Right.
But we have, in common law, we have a very well understood concept of incitement. And free speech has always been bounded by defamation and by incitement to acts of violence. This is part of that long arc of bounding of free speech. And I don't think anyone should... It's okay, or anyone would suggest that it's okay, for one Australian to incite other Australians through... lying, basically, about what's going on in farms to go and commit acts of violence.
Let's talk superannuation. The Prime Minister is open to this review of retirement income, looking at the rate of super. Do you welcome that? I mean, if you're looking at the whole system, we should look at the rate of it.
Absolutely. Well, look, I think...
Maybe changing it?
Well,
changing the timetable? What's
the Prime Minister, the Treasurer, the Minister for Finance have said that legislation we have at the moment is it goes from 9.5% to 10% in 2021 and then to 12% by 2025 in 0.5% increments. And that's not going to change. But I think Australians are rightfully concerned that they spend $23 billion a year on energy, but $30 billion a year on administration of the superannuation system. Now, it is open to, are we getting the best outcome for what is now, on some measures, the third largest savings pool in the world? And what's at stake here is people's security in retirement.
Why is 12% the holy grail here, Patrick Gorman?
Well, I think when you go to, in this case, the Coalition went to the election promising that they would maintain that timetable. So there is a question of whether or not you can actually trust the Coalition on this. We've seen people try to unpick it in recent days. Senator Bragg had some very explosive comments to make about changing that timetable. Is the holy grail because it was a promise that they took to the election.
Now, that's political promises, but why in a policy sense is it the holy grail?
Superannuation is one of the great things about Australia's retirement income system. It is going to make us stronger over time. People expect to get to 12%. I mean, Jason and I, there's no secret, are on 15.4%. I think if it's good enough for us to have a rate above 9.5%, it is good enough for working Australians.
Why not 15 for the rest of working Australians? Why is 12 the number?
Well, I'm sure we can have that conversation in 2024, 25, but let's get to 12% and let's make sure that the Coalition government doesn't even unpick that progress. It'll be good for working people having secure retirement. I think if you were to look at the thing that people would agree on before we start to split across party lines. People deserve a good, comfortable retirement.
Right, but and when this review looks at things, it could look at the figure, and if going higher means they get that good, comfortable retirement, which is hard to define, then should we be open in future years to going higher than 12?
Well, let's see whether or not the government even sticks to the 12%. I like your aspiration, Tom, that you want to get higher and you want to make sure that everyone has a very healthy superannuation.
I'm just interested in your view, though, if that's...
My view is 12% is... would be a great outcome. Right. We are legislated to get there, and the only thing that will stand in the way is the Liberal Party and the National Party.
Yes, of course. But the real issue is this system working for all Australians? And I know Patrick agrees with that secretly, that we need to make sure that this is a $2.8 trillion pool of
fixing
savings.
The system. That's one part, which everyone agrees with.
Well, no, that is the only part that matters.
Well, I mean, the amount of super you get matters as well.
Yeah, that's the part that matters. The part that matters is...
Yeah, but there's the percentage and then it has the system working.
Yeah, no.
There's also 76 recommendations from the Banking Royal Commission that the government could be moving on a little bit quicker.
87, is it 76?
76.
76, thank you. Well, we've moved very quickly on that, but this is the thing. If we don't fix this now, then it is a problem in 10, 20, 30 years' time, at which point future generations, including our generation, will look at us and say, why didn't you fix this back then when you had an opportunity to do so? Because now we're going to fall short of what the income we needed to live comfortably in retirement.
And I mean, the same argument is what I would say to Senator Bragg about unpicking that 12% commitment, where you'd say, well, hang on, you've made a decision now for a very short term.
Well, no, he hasn't made a decision. He's raised in his first speech legitimate issues, and we should be allowed in Parliament to talk about legitimate issues.
Then you go back to the whole issue. We haven't even agreed what a comfortable retirement is, what that should be, what the purpose of super is. But look, I do want to cover a few other issues because we could do that all day. Why don't we talk Boris Johnson? I was reading his quotes today.
You can't get enough of Boris.
Well, I was reading his quotes today. How would you describe his attitude towards women?
Well, I've never met Boris, but he seems to be reasonably...
But you've read about him?
Yeah, I've read about him, and he's the Prime Minister of England, and we wish him well, and... Oh, sorry, the United Kingdom.
I was going to say...
And we wish him well, and he's got a tough job in front of him, and...
Is that a no comment?
That's a I'm not going to cause a diplomatic incident on Sky News this afternoon comment. I should put that in air quotes.
That sounds like a good bumper sticker. Pat,
you'd have to get a very wide car. That's a Humvee.
What do you make of Boris Johnson?
Look, on the question of his comments about women, I guess that's for women in the United Kingdom to judge.
He made it about Malaysian. He made it about Malaysian students as well, so I guess they could.
They might have some views as well. It's going to be interesting to see how he goes. He's got one big test, which is Brexit. We will know in coming months whether he can do the thing that he has promised his own party that only he could do, and that is the great test. We've had the Boris bikes. We will see if we have the Boris Brexit. As for how he goes long term, I guess the whole world is looking with interest. It's been a really interesting time in United Kingdom politics. And I'd just say for now, former Prime Minister Theresa May, wish her all the best. And in a very tough set of circumstances, she performed incredibly well.
All right. Well, there's that famous Conservative Party conference in Bristol where he spoke, and he started by saying, "It is so good to speak in Bristol, one city that I haven't insulted in the UK."
I've got no response to that. It'll be interesting with Bojo, if nothing else. Let's talk...
Sorry, what was that? Bojo?
Bojo.
Did you just make that? That really?
That's what they call there you go.
No, when does Bojo meet ScoMo?
Oh, that is brilliant. I don't know.
There's a bumper sticker.
There is a bumper sticker. There's certainly a hashtag. Well, they're meeting at the G20, aren't they? Yeah, they are. They're meeting at the G20.
Prime Minister doesn't give me his program.
Well, he should. I'll speak to him about that.
I feel like I've walked on the set of Falinski and Gorman again. I'll push on. Industrial relations. The part of the bill the government is highlighting around ensuring integrity, the one that's been highlighting over the past couple of days is an interesting one. The worker entitlement funds and this money being given to unions. We're talking about payments of $30 million a year. What's the justification
I didn't want to correct you there.
For that, Patrick Gorman?
I think we're seeing a lot of different things conflated in this legislation. What Labor wants to see is that you don't treat unions or punish unions more than you would any other organisation, be that a church group, a sporting club, And that's exactly what this legislation seeks to do. It seeks to treat a union at a far higher standard of scrutiny. And particularly, I think about the people of unions that I've met who sit on those union executives. They are cleaners, childcare workers, they are ordinary working people, and some of the requirements that the new legislation would seek to put on them, I think is well above and beyond.
Well, what's an example in the corporate world where you could take money from a worker entitlement fund and give it back to another body that's not supposed to? This is like holiday pay and superannuation and stuff like that.
Well, I've never sat on a worker entitlement fund, so I am not probably... There are many people in this parliament who could tell you very technically how those funds are constructed. I'm not one of them.
But that money's staying in the entitlement fund, because sometimes it's the interest from it. Yeah. That should stay in the entitlement fund, surely. You're the party for workers.
Well, the funds govern themselves in accordance with the legislation that covers them.
Sure, but you can change the legislation
So
and kick them.
To change the legislation, you had 6 years.
Well, now we've got year 7. We're going to do that.
Okay.
They got round to it.
That's a bit unfair.
Is there a difference? I mean, I'm just struggling to see the logic.
I guess I support the rights of unions and the funds that unions build, and indeed these funds have been built by the actions and the initiatives of unions.
So that's the good part.
Workers'
why the money should all stay in there, including the interest.
Sorry.
No, sorry. You were about to interrupt me, and I was going to let you. As for how you actually allocate those funds, where there is a surplus, that is, you're talking about interest, that is a surplus, that should be put also into the interests of workers. I believe that unions do act in the interests of workers.
Can I ask about another aspect of this?
Yeah.
The union gave an example the other day of if you want to go in and make sure wages are being paid correctly, you've got to give 24 hours notice. And they say they often breach that because if you give 24 hours notice, you'll never actually get to the bottom of it. They say if you breach that under the new laws, you might get kicked out of the union. Do you have some sympathy for that position, given George Calumbaris?
No. Well, that's a great example. But, I mean, just what Patrick's saying here...
George is a great example of large-scale wage theft.
So just dealing with one issue at a time, the issue we're talking about is Protect and the ETU, which took $32 million from that fund. We don't know why. That wasn't done at arm's length, clearly. As it was described as sponsorship. As Christian Porter said in the House, the largest sponsorship deal prior to that was Ronaldo, who got $31 million. We then discovered today that there's a secret commission, I believe, between the MUA and their worker protection fund of $16 million. Under the corporations law, none of this would be lawful.
We've given that an
so
I've put that forward, but can I ask you
the stuff about wages? I think at the moment the problem with the Industrial Relations Act is that it sits in the 19th century and we're living in the 21st century. So unions notify someone that they're going to turn up and look at wage records, as opposed to just simply saying or applying for access to worker records that can be sent to them.
So you'd be happy to give them better access? Is there legislation in the works on that?
I don't know is the answer, but yes, I personally would like to see a situation where instead of unions having to turn up to someone's workplace, they can get records or payment records provided to them electronically, which, by the way, is what would happen for police and for any other sort of investigative agency that we have in Australia.
What do you think of that approach, Patrick Gorman?
Look, I look forward to Jason's legislation.
I'd be coming.
Is it a private members bill?
No, that's not happening.
It is a concern when you see these stories about people who have worked, haven't been paid what they're entitled to, whether you could have a more efficient system in terms of actually giving unions and workers themselves. Sometimes the reason that workers go to unions and say, I want you to have a look at these wage records, is because they can't get proper access themselves. And so empowering workers to have more access to their own information.
And maybe finding workers that weren't available.
Now in the case you were talking about, which was the restaurant one, you had the president of the ACTU on Sky earlier this week concede that actually workers had to end up going to the employer himself to get
one of the cases.
In that case, who then agreed to take it to a Fair Work Ombudsman because
I look forward to your private members bill as well.
That's not happening, but thank you. You can keep saying
I'll draft it for
it's not happening. No.
We've got what is known in the business as a hard out. I'm just looking at it. I get in a lot of trouble if I go over. So thank you both, gentlemen. We'll speak next time. Coming up is